are listening to a Freedom Student Ministry podcast.
I'll share about my mission trip to Nicaragua. About 4 to 5 years ago, I've never been out on a mission trip, and I went to a church called Bethel, and I met like a girl there, and me and my friend just became really good friends with her. And so during that year, I think it was 2012, towards the end of 2012, I asked her, like, she told me her pastor was planning on going to like Nicaragua, and if you don't know where that's at, it's literally below Mexico, and then there's like that little line of countries, like there's, I think, Puerto Rico there, Brazil's right underneath that line, but then there's Nicaragua like right in the middle. So it's supposedly really hot. It's like a really hot country. So I've never been there, and I don't know how I was gonna get there, and so I began just praying and asking God, like, somehow make a way so I can go experience a different country and go on my very first mission trip. I was like only 16 years old at that time, and what happened was I wanted to go to Israel. Do you guys know where Israel is at? Like Jerusalem? No? It's in the Eastern Europe. So, or sort of a little bit more like in the mid-eastern area where Egypt is at. If you guys know Egypt, there's Rome that's nearby, or not far away. And there's a bunch of Middle Eastern countries as well, like Pakistan is in that region, and a bunch of other Muslim countries. So that's where Jerusalem was. So I wanted to go to Jerusalem, but like it was just not promising. Like I didn't have enough money. So I supernaturally, like God supernaturally, like I was worried about not going on a mission trip that year. But I found out from my friend that her pastor is the interpreter on the mission trip to Nicaragua, and this was her pastor from San Diego. So I'm like, okay, I don't know this pastor guy. I have no clue like who he is. I have no clue about anything except that he's going to Nicaragua, and I'm like, I want to go. And so I hit him up, gave him one phone call, and right away I was like, hey, my name's Andre, and you probably heard from Shelly about me, and I want to go on the mission trip with you and the team. And so he's like, oh yeah, all you got to do is buy the ticket and we'll meet you there. That's all the information that he gave me. Now, you may think that's crazy, 16 years old, and you have no clue who this guy is. You have no clue if they're going to be there. You have no clue about anything. You don't know their faces, nothing. So it's kind of scary. At that age, it's kind of scary. So I said, God, I trust in you. I trust that this is from you, and I'm going to go to Nicaragua. So I bought my ticket for $600, and I only had like $100 left for like food and stuff, and the mission trip was like a week long, like 7-8 days. And so I ended up flying on the day that he was going to fly in. And I come to the airport, and I'm still scared. Like, this is my first time going through like customs, and you have to like pay a fee to actually get into Nicaragua. And I was freaking out. I'm like, oh dang, I don't think I have enough money. And then next thing you know, I had enough money just to get in. And I was like, oh, this is a miracle. And so I finally got there, and I started walking through the thing, and this guy, it was like a glass window, and he's holding up a sign, and it said Andre on it. And as I was walking down like this hallway, he looks from the other side, and he's like pointing at the sign, like with his eyes open, smiling, and he's like, "Is this you?" Coming through the glass. I can't hear him, but it's kind of funny. I'm like, "That's me." And so I got really excited that I'm there. I'm in Nicaragua, and I'm meeting up with a person that I have no clue who he is. I just know that through him, God opened up the door for me to go to Nicaragua. For the next week, we went to a city called Huaco, and we got to like do huge like outdoor evangelistic like crusades, and we got to do a lot of like pastoral things. And the coolest part about that whole trip, I'll be honest, it was so cool. Now, some of you guys probably would be like, man, I want to be in that position. We actually got to speak on live radio, one of the popular radio stations in Nicaragua, and we were broadcasted on TV twice about what we were doing. So as you can tell, I'm kind of Nicaragua famous. But I don't know if they remember my face. It's been 4 years ago. But that was probably a big testimony, like huge. I didn't feel like I was qualified, to be honest. I felt like here I am, 16 years old. I'm hungry for God, but I don't know how God's going to use me or how God could use me, because I just didn't really have confidence until I went, and the pastor literally gave me so much freedom to speak, to preach, to pray for people. And I got to see like every service we went to, whether it was like an outdoor service or in a church, people are just bawling their eyes out. You see some people like falling to the ground because they are experiencing the power of God and they can't stand anymore. And so they just, as people are laying hands on them, people just be falling to the ground, shaking under the power of God. And a lot of people I would pray for would start bawling their eyes out and just profusely crying. I remember like putting my hands on people, and I could just feel like tears just like on their shoulders, on their faces, everywhere, just falling down because people are just being touched powerfully by God. And that was probably one of my I guess first best experiences on a mission trip. And I didn't know, honestly, I don't know how God provided for the money. I had $700 just like that. I don't know if it was, I know my parents helped me a little bit, but it was like in general, like I just had money coming in from different people, and I just was able to put it aside for a mission trip. And I didn't know if it was going to be for Israel, for Jerusalem, to go there, or to go somewhere else. So God opened completely a different door, and I got to experience one of my life-changing mission trips. So I just wanted to share that to encourage you guys that you can dream big with God. And even if it doesn't seem like your way is working, it's because God has something better for you. And honestly, that was probably a better choice for me to go to Nicaragua than to Jerusalem, because actually, during that time, I became like a spiritual son to the pastor who was our translator for the evangelist who we were partnering with. So he really fell in love with me. They paid for everything for me once I got there. Ran out of money. One crazy testimony, the wife of the pastor, the interpreter's like brother, his wife, so his sister-in-law, she had a problem with her stomach. She thought she had like a cancer in her stomach. So that night we went over, when I landed at the airport, we went over to their house to stay a night for like a day or 2 nights. I think it was like 2 nights. And I prayed for her stomach. Her stomach gets completely healed. Next morning, she tells me that her stomach is healed. She calls her pastor, says, "Pastor, there's this gringo, this white guy from America, and he prayed for my stomach and he's healed. We're having service tonight. Can he preach?" So that night I preached. I literally ran out of all my money by that time. Crazy thing. Now imagine being in a third world country, having no more money. And this country is pretty poor. It's poverty-stricken people. It's just not pretty. The streets are like beat up, crooked, potholes, everything. And after I got done with my message, this like a little bit older lady, like maybe in her 30s, 40s, she comes up to me and she comes up, gives me a hug, and grabs my hands and closes it. And inside of her hands was an offering because I spoke a message at their church. Now that really touched my heart. I did not want to receive that money. I said, no, I can't take it, because I just knew that I just felt it wasn't right. But she insisted. I took the money, and I was able to bless people through it, and I was able to provide for myself. So it just worked out both ways. So yeah, just dream big.
Dream big.
Yeah.
Amen. Becca, why don't you pray for us?
God, I just thank you for tonight, and I thank you for Mark, and that you're just going to speak through him, and we're going to get a better understanding of the book of Esther and how God can work through us, like he did through Esther, God. And I thank you for what you're going to do tonight, and I pray that through tonight, whether it's when Mark speaks or through prayer or through worship tonight, that we're just going to be touched by the Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks for that, Andre.
You're welcome.
So if you just touch the space bar,
It'll shoot me through.
it'll move forward.
Okay. Okay, so we talked about who last week? Jonah, right? And this week we talked about Esther. There in the story, because it is a story. It's not. It doesn't mention God in it at all. But God is sewn in there once you get done reading this. When you get done reading the 10 chapters, it's one of those stories you go, oh yeah, well, you reflect. And does anybody know what comprehension means? The word comprehension?
Not that smart.
It means to understand, or to just basically understand, or you read something and you comprehend it. You're understanding it, and your mind is.
You know what's going on.
You know what's going on. There's a progression. In every story, there's a beginning, a middle, and end. And in this story, there's stuff happening in the beginning, and stuff happening in the middle, and stuff happening at the end. But you really, it's not. It's one of those that you walk away going, oh, now I get it, or oh yeah, this. Well, what about this, and what about that? So Esther, I'm going to have to give you a little bit of background because. It's in the Old Testament. Old Testament is it's old school, but it's. I'm going to tell you guys the story tonight, like they told the story of Esther way back when, 2,000 plus years ago, because that's how they didn't have paper, they didn't have parchment, they did have papyrus, they did have scrolls and stuff, but that wasn't until later. So every story was told by word of mouth and memory. So they'd sit around in a group like this and around the fire, or after they got done eating dinner or whatever, and they tell the story. So I'm going to kind of just reflect on that, and it's because it's really the story of Esther is it's really a Jewish thing. I mean, Esther was a Jew, and her it was actually her uncle Mordecai. Esther's parents had died, and they were living in captivity, basically. They were slaves, basically, in a foreign country. They were under the rule of a guy named Xerxes. So anyway, there's about 6 characters in this story. And the first one, here, I'll show you the first space bar. You want to get the lights? This guy Xerxes was like 3rd or 4th. There's Nebuchadnezzar, there's Cyrus, well, these are all kings. Cyrus, and then there was Darius, and then there was Darius the First, and then there was this guy Xerxes, okay? And Xerxes ended up with having, I don't know if you can see, this is Egypt here, the Nile River is like right here. He had all of this from the very far, and this is Gandria or Sagina, but this is like 2,800 miles, give or take. So last week, does anybody remember how many days it would take to walk across Nineveh? Jonah, story of 3 days. So how long do you think it would take to walk from this place to that place or that place? It doesn't matter. Oh, like months maybe, walking, even with a donkey or a camel. So this was all of Xerxes. It's basically Persia is what he was in control of, Babylon and all these major, and he was a bad guy. His father before him and before that. So they were all bad guys. And what they would do, and it's been done throughout history, is they would go and conquer countries or a city, and then they would take the people and then integrate them into their own lands and make them slaves mostly. And so this guy Xerxes has this legacy to live up to, right? And he's a bad dude. Has anybody ever seen the movie 300 with Gerard Butler? And it's about the Battle of Thermopylae. It's a kind of a history thing, but this guy Xerxes was portrayed as this guy right here. And in the movie they made him larger than what was his name? The king of Greece. Anyway, they made him larger. They put all this gold on him. He was mean and nasty and had all these. He had like 5 million men in his army. So you got this king, and he's got slaves under him, and he has this queen. Her name is Vashti, and he has this like 180-day party or something crazy, and at the very end of it, he invites his queen, who I'm sure was just a knockout, drop dead. He's got his choice of thousands of women, and he chooses Vashti as a queen. Huh?
Spicy.
Yeah, spicy. So you can imagine she was probably beautiful, and he has his eunuchs. Anybody know what a eunuch is? It's like they're like I would say slaves, basically, of the king or a queen, and they would send them out. They're messengers. Anyway, he sends one of his eunuchs out to go get the queen, and she says, "No, I ain't coming." Vashti, okay, and he's got all these noble people around him and his entourage, and he says, "What? She's not coming?" And one of his noblemen says, "We can't let this happen. I mean, if the queen ain't going to come when the king calls, then everybody out throughout your whole land is going to say, their wives are going to say, well, we don't have to go. I don't want to go. If the queen didn't go, I don't have to go." So that really, that sparks the whole beginning of this whole thing where God is in this whole story. This is how it sparks. You got a bad guy and a wife that doesn't want to comply with what their husband says. Basically, is what it amounts to. And so the noblemen come up with this idea. They say, "Well, let's replace the queen. If we want to get her out of there. If she's gonna be defiant like that, then we don't want all of our wives saying we don't have to go or we shouldn't go. So let's get a new queen in there." So another nobleman comes up with this idea. Well, why don't we go out and just get all the beautiful women into your country? He had 127 provinces. How do I go back? Arrow.
Yeah, the arrow. There you go.
100. There's only a few, but he had 127 provinces, and probably over, I'd say, probably 4 or 5 million people under him. So you can imagine that they're going to go out throughout the whole land, his 127 provinces, and find some suitable queens, right? Which was probably in 1,000. I was thinking hundreds, but then you equivalent that to millions, so probably thousands of women. Okay, and one of these particular women happens to be Esther. Oh, I'll get back to him in a minute. Well, there's Esther. So Esther is a Jew. She's a slave. She's a virgin. She's young. She is the picture you see here. Probably this is from a movie actually made for her, Esther. I think it doesn't do her justice. It says in the Bible that she had a beautiful figure and she was very, very. She's gorgeous. So it probably doesn't do her justice if you're talking thousands of women. And here we're going to have the king is going to see this woman and say, "Ping, that's the one." All right. So she's probably twice as hot as Vashti was, right? So Esther comes into the picture, and there is something that just kind of grabs you at the beginning when you learn, or after you actually, in the beginning and in the end, you find out that Esther really doesn't say much, just like Jonah didn't say much, throughout the whole story. She doesn't say but 10 words, but they are so highly impactful, and they lasted through up into this day right now. So I'll get to that in a minute. So here's Esther. She's a Jew. She's a slave. And Xerxes picks her out and says, "That's the one. Bing, I want her." And they had to go through a process. It was like a 12-month process to become a queen. You had to go through a beautifying process, which was like they'd bathe you in rose petals and they'd put makeup on you, and you'd have to do queenly duty or pre-queenly duties, I guess it would be. But in the end, she's the chick, right? So she's got a big heart for her people, Jewish people, okay? And they're in captivity, right? And they've been in captivity for a long time. So, going back, this guy enters the story, and this is her uncle, and his name is Mordecai. And Mordecai is kind of like he's like, it doesn't really say what he is. He's a businessman. Let's just say that he does do business with people, and he with probably just Jewish people, because in those days you really didn't step out of your own, nationality. Okay, they did integrate you, but you did work for them. You did work for them if you were a slave, but you didn't trade with them. You didn't give back to them. You worked for them. So this guy was probably, a high guy amongst his own people, amongst the Jewish people. So, and he was also her uncle, and he took care of her after her parents had died. And he was kind of an interesting character in the story. He one day he discovers a plot. He overhears these two guys talking, and they're about killing the king. And so he tells this guy to go and tell the king, hey, these guys are going to murder you. They're plotting to murder you. So, and what kind of is interesting about this guy, Mordecai, is he tells this, and the king says thank you, but doesn't do anything for him. Okay? But later on in the story, he does a lot more for him. So, this guy, his name's Haman or Haman. He is Xerxes' right-hand man. He's got the signet ring, he's got the robes, he's like the second dude in charge. And he's a bad dude. He comes up with this plot to just let's kill all the Jewish people in your kingdom. And the king just says, okay, sure, whatever you want to do, I give you permission. So he's out to ruin Mordecai or kill Mordecai, but secretly, Esther has not told the king that she's Jewish. So that's like the secret, the last ace in the deal, so to speak. So this guy Haman wants to impale people on poles and burn them at the stake and get rid of all the Jewish people. So, as it were, Esther, good. Esther has huge heart for her people, and so does Mordecai. And Mordecai, after he discovers this plot, okay, he asks Mordecai, her uncle, asks Esther to talk to the king and get this burden off. Get this guy Haman off of us, okay? Because he wants to kill us, and you have an access to the king. And she doesn't say very much. She just says, well, they had the interesting part about it is the law in all of this is she was so striking that not only her beauty, outside stuff, but I can imagine she was a person that you would look at and you would go, man, she's probably got something to say, or she's probably interesting in some, you could just tell the vibe, I guess, is what you would say. So, she had that connection with the king. She didn't say very much, and she didn't have to, and she didn't have to beg or plead. She was just humble with the king, and invited him and that bad guy Haman to a party, and said, here's the king saying, I'll give you whatever you want, up to half to my kingdom. Half of that big old, 2,800 mile plot would be hers if she wanted it. But she didn't. That's not what she wanted. She had a heart for her people, and so they had a party. She set up this banquet, invited Haman. Haman came out. He was probably bragging and boasting about what he was going to do to the Jews, and she said to come back the next day and I'll tell you what I want to the king. And they came back the next day, and all she said was, I just want my people protected. I want them, I want them saved. So the cat's out of the bag, right? And so, he, the king just gave Haman the ability to just kill the Jews. Well, that turned on him. All of a sudden now, Haman is the guy that the king says, no, you're going to do what? You were going to do what to these people? No way, ain't happening. So there's a big reversal in the story, and Haman ends up getting put on a pole and all of his property given to Esther and Mordecai. And Mordecai becomes the guy, takes Haman's place basically as the number 2 guy. Signet ring and clothing and properties. And this is what caught me after this. That's basically the story, okay? What caught me is the history behind that whole thing. It's called it's a Jewish holiday, and they have been celebrating it every year since the time of Esther. Okay, so this is how big of an impact Esther and Mordecai. They wrote they wrote this down, that what had happened, and it's called a Purim, and it's a Jewish holiday. It's kind of like, I looked it up online. They describe it kind of like a little, not so much Halloween. They do dress up, Jewish people or Jewish kids dress up as their heroes in the story. And even in the synagogues, they tell the story twice a day. They tell it in the morning and they tell it at night. And every time the name Haman is said, they make a noise with, or they make some sort of weird noise when the word or the name Haman is spoken. So they celebrate it with they have cake, and it's a big party for 2 days, and it goes from February 28th to March 1st. But all the way back in 465 BC, before Christ, okay, Esther and Mordecai had this happen. And they wrote it, it was written in the Bible, and the Jewish people have been following that and having a celebration because of their deliverance, because they got delivered from this bad guy Haman. And the king wasn't a great guy either. He loved to put people on poles, right on. But it didn't take very much for the king to say, okay, sure, all right, and love these people and give them prominence and give them, money and land and all that. So after I got done reading the story, I was first, you read one of those. It's a story like you kind of ask yourself, why is this happening now? It's kind of boring a little bit. And then it kind of gets exciting, and then bad guy does something good, and da 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 da. Well, at the end, I was like, where is God in all this? How come God wasn't mentioned? Why didn't there's usually some sort of miracle that happens, or some sort of huge climax, like, yeah, we win. But it wasn't really like that to read Esther. But then I started thinking back about how she acted, and about how humble she was, and about how humble Mordecai was. And they're slaves, man. They're Jewish slaves. They don't have it. You can't say anything. And here they are. They don't have to plead with the king. The king just says, "Okay, all right. I'll give you half my kingdom to a slave girl. It's his queen now." So there's God using this huge bad guy. There's God in the whole story right there. He's making this big bad guy have this humble heart, and having compassion on people that are in his kingdom, right? And giving them a holiday, basically, that's going to last, centuries. And so, God can use things for His will no matter what. And God is in the story. Not only is He with Esther, but He is also with Xerxes, and it gets back to that like we talked about in Jonah. You got to love your enemies, right? Which is a tough thing. There's some people that hate is a big word for me, a strong word for me, and I don't use it anymore. Dislike is my, but even then, dislike is still strong, can be still strong. And it's tough to love somebody who's, especially if they want to harm you in some way, or if they want to take you down somehow. They talk bad about you behind your back. Those things hurt. They drive, but God wants you to love them. How do you do that? How does that work? through prayer, through praising Him, through asking God, please deliver me. I mean, it's taken me, I'm 47, and it's taken me, 30 years to realize that I can forgive. I can forgive somebody. And these people in this story forgave those. They didn't even think about it. They just wanted to, they didn't want to boast. They didn't want to brag. They just wanted a place. And we all have a place somewhere, okay? We all fit with something somewhere. And God is like the conduit for that, okay? He's like, I don't know if you plug in an electrical cord, right? He's the electricity that ignites that light right there. He's the stuff that you don't see. Well, you can't see it if you get shot, but that can happen. But God He's the conduit, okay? And that electricity is ignited from some water somewhere, right? So in the midst of all that, my point is that if you don't have God, then you don't have power. You don't have light. You don't have energy. You don't, if you don't. And these people had energy, and I want energy. I want you guys to have energy. It's difficult to find sometimes, or to even notice. And you can't. I don't think it's a good idea to go through life thinking that you don't matter, or that you even your enemies matter. Okay, so you matter. You have purpose. Your enemies have purpose. It's all part of God's plan, and it's if you don't understand something, or if you don't quite comprehend, the story of your own lives, then talk to him. Ask him. Hey, what's going on? I don't know you that well, but I'd love to get to know you. I'd love for you to be, in my heart, in my life, to be, to give me energy, to give me power, to have my lights to keep my lights on. And see, here I am getting all this stuff out of Esther, okay? And it wasn't really all that awesome of a story, but it was full of stuff. After I got done, I was like, wow, okay. And you matter. Everybody has purpose. Everybody has matter. So you matter to somebody. And you may not know it yet, but you're going to run across somebody that's going to inspire you or give you insight on something, and you're going to take that, okay, and you're going to receive that. That's God. God's giving you somebody. Right now, in everybody's life, right here in this room, has somebody that they are inspired by, or that they look up to, okay, or that they have. Because I'm inspired by Esther. She didn't really have to do much. Right? So, and that's the way God works, I think. God works in a way where sometimes for us as humans, it seems like it takes forever. God, why is it taking so long? We don't like waiting. But in that waiting time, there's this thing called patience, or perseverance, or endurance. And God wants you to go through those things because He wants you to be loyal. He wants you to be real, because those things are like iron sharpening iron. Patience and endurance and perseverance and long suffering. We have to go through those things, which if you really compare it to living for eternity, it's like it's like not even a drop in the bucket. Okay? So if you're going through long suffering, or if you're going through pain in your life, or if you're going through some sort of suffrage, or you're just waiting for, the light turns green. Sometimes that happens, that God will come to you and He'll meet you in that happy medium place. And in the end, you'll go, like I said, I'm 47. In the end, you'll have days like, man, I am so glad I waited. I am so thankful that I was patient. I'm so thankful that I got perseverance and the encouragement from that one person, or from those people. Like for myself, Wendy. Wendy is when I first met her 7 years ago. I met Jay first, but I met Wendy, and Wendy was like, she had like this beam. She still does. It's like a beam of light around her. And she prayed for me, and she liked me right away, and she was a loving sister in Christ right away. Bam, it was impactful. And she's not the only one. There's others, but she sticks out in my mind. Every time I see her, I just want to spiritually give her, just a manhood. Like, go, yeah, go. Happy. She makes me happy. And she prays really well. She's a warrior. And she cooks some mean spaghetti, and she does make really good cinnamon rolls. But she is like a light, okay? She is somebody that inspires me, like right now. And everybody in this room has somebody like that. So anyway, to round up the Esther thing is it may, and I think God, this is one little tidbit about Esther, that says that she was beautiful and that she was, striking. And I think that was meant, on the outside, but it says it kind of like twice, like she was beautiful and she had a nice, you know what I'm saying? I'm saying that that's inwardly what all of us have. We all have some sort of beauty about us. We all have some sort of shocking thing to, give somebody else. So, So I was supposed to give you just a story overview. I'm sure Erica's going to pull something completely different out of all this, but So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to have everybody, and I want everybody to say something about the person. There's a person in your life, or maybe you don't have one. I don't know. There's a person in your life, and I want you to share it with everybody, since there's not very many of us, that inspires you, that gives you energy, that gives you, it could be your mom, your dad, and just say something about how they do it. Like I just said about Wendy. So let's go around the room, and if you don't feel comfortable about saying anything, it's okay. But I would like to get to know you better, and that's how we would, get to know each other better, is by saying who we are inspired by. Somebody start. Come on. Bill.
My best friend Brody, he has a brain tumor and in the front of his brain, and he inspires me because he's so active and stuff, even not caring, and he's not supposed to. The doctor says he's not supposed to live past 25. He says he's gonna live a full life like everybody else, and he's super positive about it. He saw all the things that would kill you, and just positive, active, plays baseball, plays varsity,
Cool.
played 136 games in 1 year.
Wow. Someone else. Don't make me call on you. Just come on. Stay out.
People I look up to is mostly just like all the leaders and just people that I can just happily look at and be like, wow, I could become like them one day. Because, all the leaders are always happy or, depressed in a good way. And I just, I like to see that, different changes in lives. And so, just, all the leaders, kids.
Someone else.
I was gonna say, just the leaders also, they're just such like your leaders in your group, Erica, Wendy, Mark, Andre, and Ray, they're just so hungry for God, and you can just tell by, on Sunday, by the way they worship, or just how they live out their lives, you can tell, they're just so hungry for God, and it's just wow, I said, I'm gonna be like them one day. It's just cool to think about, and they're people that I look up to, and I can tell anything.
Someone else.
My grandpa, because whenever I get a chance to talk to him, he always says something. It just sounds wise and it's meaningful, and that there's meaning to what he's gonna say.
Cool. Yeah. Someone else.
I have a lot of people who inspire me, but I think direct personal relationship, it would be Pastor Rob in Southern California and my second year mentor at Bethel, Jason Chin. Just want to live like them. Their life is so amazing.
Good. Who else?
I was actually gonna say Wendy too when you were talking about this earlier. I was thinking and I was like, Wendy's my person. She's my discipleship leader with Julia, and just like she doesn't even have to say anything. Just watching her live her life, it's like I'm learning things. She doesn't have to say a word. The way that she carries herself, you can just tell that she has so much wisdom and love and compassion for other people. Just watching her do what she does every day. Like I could just sit and watch her all the time and learn so much stuff. Never have to open her mouth.
Yeah.
But when she does open her mouth, just like Jesus flows out of her. Like it's amazing to listen to. And she doesn't like to stop. She just keeps going, and it's amazing, and I love it. And then Meryl too. It's just the two of them. They're like they're mom.
Somebody else. Okay. Okay. If you don't have one, or if you don't have anybody, it's coming, or it's gonna happen. Okay. I mean, it's just a matter of time. And there can be many people, like Andre said, there's many. I mean, I can think of a lot too. But God gives us, those are gifts. That's a gift. You have somebody that is inspiring to you. And once you get that inspiration, or once you get that motivation, you want to take and give that to somebody else. Okay? Be an inspiration to somebody else. And it's not like you don't have to force it. Okay? Like what Rachel was just saying. I want to be like that too. Or I want to have some of that fire. Or I want to have some of that gusto, you know? Oh! Battle cry, however you want to put it. And that's God. That is God. When God shows up, He shows up in a big way. We got all this little small stuff spoken in the story. It didn't really matter. Didn't seem like it was going to matter much, and then all of a sudden, there's God in the very end going, that's right. Now you got a holiday. Now you got a celebration for living. And that's what He wants for us. He wants us to celebrate. He wants us to celebrate. He wants us to celebrate life. I mean, there's some things that suck. There's some things that are terrible. You know, there's some things that are just there's no words sometimes. But God's got it. In the very end of it all, God is got it. And if you don't lean to that, then you're not going to experience the celebration. You know, I urge you, I implore you to want to enjoy life. Enjoy life.
You have just been listening to a Freedom Student Ministry podcast.